The champ is here.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble.
The champ is here. I must be the greatest. The champ is here.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people.
The champ is here.
I will not lose.
I'm a bad man. I shook up the world.
Yes, welcome. You could be anywhere in the world, but you are here with we. My name is EJ, and I got my man.
MH.
Yes, he is the DB of the show, and we are Black in Sports, giving a voice to the culture that won't shut up and dribble. Here interviewing the best professionals in the game, in the boardroom, and in the classroom. Here we covering it all, laughing at all, while providing a platform to be heard. So if you're a regular listener, you know what we got to do. We got to welcome our guests, and I'm going to take my time with this, right, because I want to make sure we get it right. All right, so he is the Catherine and Frank Pierce Endowed Chair for the Study of Race and Popular Culture. He is also a professor of cinema and media studies at the University of Southern Carolina. Fight on. Let's go fight on. And that's just
Southern California. Don't send me to Carolina, please.
Hey, there you go, Southern California. And, you know, taking it slow and still messing up. But I'm excited nonetheless. But that was just his day job. He's also an author of several books, with his current book out, Rappers Deluxe, How Hip Hop Made the World, being his most recent. Also, and that's just the endless film credits that he has. And we're going to talk about all that he's done, whether it's writing, producing, and just being the go-to voice for his pioneer of work in cinema, media, hip-hop culture, fashion, art, and sports. So please give it up for the Notorious Ph.D., Dr. Todd Boyd. Thank you so much, Doc. Appreciate you hopping on with us. Like I said, fumbled up a little bit just because of the nervousness, and excited to have you on. But how we always open the show is with the shoot your shot moment. With that shoot your shot moment, man, it could have just been any time in life, early on, college days, or just currently, a moment where you shot your shot. You either learned a lesson or you won the big bag. So give us a shoot your shot moment.
Man, that's, at my age, there's a lot to choose from. It's kind of overwhelming. Using that metaphor of shooting your shot, you have to work on your shot, and you have to know when to take it. And you have to also know when to pass it up, So I'll leave you with that. Give me those three options: knowing when to take it, knowing when to pass it up. Sometimes you need to pass the ball to somebody else. Sometimes you need a few more dribbles, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes it's necessary to just, fire it up and, do what you do. So I've always tried to approach life that way.
Love it.
Now, Dr. Boyd, nobody's answered that question with the point guard kind of reference to it. Everybody's just shooting. So does that just come with wisdom and experience?
I mean, you watch basketball these days, everybody's shooting threes. I'm from a different era. When I was coming up, the point guard position was played a lot different than the way it's played now. Steph Curry is an incredible player, but based on the way I learned basketball, he's playing more of a two guard, a combo guard, than a point guard, and that's no disrespect. That's just changing the game. But the point guards I grew up watching played the game differently. So, on any given night, you had to figure out what was necessary. That might be scoring, that might be playing defense, that might be running the offense. I'm a product of my environment just like everybody else. So when you say shoot your shot, it's like you got to figure out what the defense is giving you. And, a lot of times, you run and pick and roll, people run under the screen, they disrespect you. You have to let them know you can shoot. And other times, it's important to feed somebody else. So I've always tried to approach it like that old school point guard energy, more so than these, cats today just raining threes, which is impressive. But I come from a different generation.
I feel that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, your love for sports, where did that start? Did that start with basketball? That start with football? Where did that love of sports start?
I mean, I would say, again, when I was growing up as a kid in the 70s, first of all, it was Muhammad Ali. And so I would say boxing. Okay. And then, Hank Aaron was on his way to break Babe Ruth's record. So as a kid, I was really into baseball. There was a lot bigger black presence in Major League Baseball at the time. Cats like, Reggie Jackson and, some of the other greats from that era. I mean, I saw Hank. I saw the end of Willie Mays' career. So, baseball was big. Football was big. Of course, football was developing into what it's become in the 70s, and the Steelers were, a great team that I really enjoyed. And then the game of basketball, I saw some incredible basketball in the 70s, watching the Pistons, being from Detroit, going to Cobo Arena. I've been doing this so long. I saw Kareem when he played for the Bucks before he got traded to the Lakers, which is one of the, highlights of my career in terms of watching sports, is like, seeing Kareem well before he became a Laker, which is how people know him. And so, I was just surrounded by it at that time in the 70s and learning all those games and wanting to, participate. And I was always, I think, more interested in being a coach. To me, coaches were the cats who were running the show. Dudes was out there playing, which is cool. And like everybody, I wanted to do that. But, I've always been into the fashion game. So when I would see those basketball coaches suited, and they were the ones calling the shots, that was real appealing. I saw the end of John Wooden's career, the great legendary college basketball coach. And, that had an appeal. So as I said, I think all of us are products of our environment. So growing up at that time, the NBA was different than it would become, and the NFL was different. Baseball, all those things very different. So, but Ali was, above all of it to me. So that's what influenced me. That's what got me into it and kind of laid a foundation. And I've, tried to build on that in terms of interest since then.
So being from Detroit, what does Detroit versus everyone mean to you?
Again, the 70s is an interesting time to grow up in Detroit because, Coleman Young was elected mayor in 1973. And the way people look at Detroit now, Coleman Young was the first black mayor, and Detroit was in the 70s becoming a black city in a major way, And so, a lot of negativity was being directed at Detroit. The auto industry, which had been kind of the bedrock of the American economy, declined, and it hit everybody in Detroit really hard, and certainly hit a lot of black people, especially hard. And so, you had a city that was all of a sudden predominantly black because of white flight, people leaving after the riots, and you had a black mayor, you had a economy that was in bad shape. You had a lot of crime, but it's Detroit. And I think black people in Detroit felt like, times may be hard, things may be difficult, certain things might be raggedy, but it's ours. And, we rep that. And so whatever anybody else is talking about is irrelevant, because you really can't talk about culture, popular culture in America without talking about Detroit. And people were very proud of that. And also the toughness that developed, people embraced that, as part of the identity. Like everybody else is talking bad about you, hating or whatever. It's like, but you won't come in the city with all that. You know what I'm saying? So there was a toughness, I felt like, to being from Detroit that people embraced and became part of the city's identity. And the sports teams, had to reflect that. So to me, there's a confidence that I got. People growing up in the city, if you managed to get out, like you had to go through some shit to get out, and so if you did that, there was a toughness that you developed, like the city was tough, and the confidence that came with it, that as I got older and went other places, having respect for where people are from or whatever, it's like I'm from Detroit, and the cultural center of America in a lot of ways grows out of Detroit. Motown was doing it, back in the late 50s, early 60s, before a lot of these other cities even got put on. When you want to talk about, again, sports, I was having a conversation with someone recently. I'm like, and they were talking about what's the best city for boxers. And I'm like, bruh, Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, the Hitman. That's the end of the conversation, right? I mean, you can't match that, And when you want to talk about, like, I had this conversation with people from Chicago a lot, and we talk about hoops, and Chicago is a great hoop city. I'm like, but for us, the conversation start with the Iceman, George Gervin. So just the city and the flavor and the history and the culture and all that, that's, sort of long answer to your question, but Detroit versus everybody, like, this is what it is. And, let's do that. And, knuck if you buck, all that, if you want it, you won't smoke. That's Detroit. Like, better and for worse.
I love that.
I love the knuck if you buck reference already. Let's go. But no, I think those sentiments, and I think Dan Campbell, there was kind of questions whether he was the right person, and like he believes in that grit, right? And he understands that. And I think that's done a lot for the team, for them to kind of go back to the roots of it all and embody that spirit and that gusto for them, and how he's changed the Lions. So I agree with you, and it's great to see.
I mean, I remember that press conference, and I'm sitting there like, I've been watching the Lions my whole life. My father gave me a Lions jersey when I was 8. So, I remember when the Lions were playing at Tiger Stadium. And so I've seen every coach, for 50 years, literally. And I remember Dan Campbell's press conference, and, he's talking about biting kneecaps, and I'm like, here we go again. But, look what he's done. He and Brad Holmes have built a great culture. And it's frustrating watching that game Sunday night. There's still some, ways to go. But the culture they built and the expectations and tapping into that grit, the whole thing about going for fourth down, which didn't turn out too well the other night. Situational football is still a thing. But, the Lions kind of made that their identity, like going for it on fourth down, which is a great metaphor for the city of Detroit. Like, you don't have anything to lose. Like, you got to go for it. Taking that risk, I think, embody the city. You got to deploy that a little better. You can't just always, I get it, sometimes you got to just take your foot off the gas and say, give me these 3 points and, live to fight another series. But at the same time, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have done an amazing job of making the Lions one of the best teams in the NFL, but they still had that next step to take.
When did you first see, and maybe it was Ali, the impact that sports has on just culture, and especially here in America?
It was most definitely Muhammad Ali. Remembering as a kid the fight of the century, the first Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier fight, and the thing I remember was my parents got suited, and cleaned up and dressed and pressed, and they went to a theater to watch that fight on closed circuit. So it was like an event. You watch fights now at your crib, pay-per-view, what have you. But, to have to get dressed and go to a theater to watch a fight, it was like an event, going to a ball or going to some formal activity, like, and I just remember that. I'm like, this is bigger than a boxing match. This is politics. This is culture. You look at all the people who were at that fight when you see footage of it now from Miles Davis and Diana Ross, and famous scene in the film American Gangster, Frank Lucas in the chinchilla coat. The photographer at ringside for that fight is Frank Sinatra. Barry Gordy's in the house, Hugh Hefner. You got gangsters and players and pimps and celebrities and boxing aficionados. You got everybody. That was the center of the universe, March 8th, 1971. Interesting. Group of people in Philadelphia broke into FBI headquarters in suburban Philadelphia, FBI offices, I should say. And they uncovered all these, documents documenting what was going on in terms of the FBI and how they were dealing with, say, Vietnam War protests, anti-Vietnam War protesters, and, other sort of political entities. And the reason they picked that night was because they knew everybody was going to be paying attention to the fight. That's how big it was. So Ali was a show throughout the 70s, Going to Zaire, The Rumble in the Jungle, The Thriller Manila. So watching Ali just really bring together politics and culture and religion, race. Ali had rhymes, you know what I'm saying, before hip hop. He gonna give you a rhyme before the fight starts. And so watching all that, it just was obvious to me, even as a kid, all those things were connected.
Nice. So from the journey, like, how do you get from Detroit to going to school in Iowa? Like, how did that come about? What was the, getting your higher degree there in Iowa?
So, so you're in Detroit. So that's, you're in the Big Ten, the old school Big Ten. I'm at USC and we're in the Big Ten now, which is great. The thing was always, back then, like, team from the Big Ten go play team from the West Coast in the Rose Bowl, and all that's, gone now. But that's how it was forever. But being in the Big Ten, in Detroit, everybody, when I was growing up, what I remember was so many Michigan fans. And later I started to, encounter Michigan State fans. But, a lot of people in Detroit, at least from, around me, were Go Blue. And Magic went to Michigan State, and so that changed. And, various times they've had, good football teams or whatever, but it was Michigan State. But Big Ten, Michigan playing Ohio State. Again, growing up, this was Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. What do they call it? 10-year war. But I was always tuned in, to the Big Ten. And by the time I got ready to go to graduate school, it's the late 80s. And, as they say, the block is hot. Detroit is popping in the late 80s. It's all kind of craziness going on. And, Iowa may sound unusual to some people as a place to go from Detroit, but trust and believe, I was trying to get out of Detroit in the late 80s. And Iowa was perfect because it was the opposite of everything that was happening in Detroit. I always tell this story. When I got to Iowa, I remember the first night I went to try to go to sleep, and I kept hearing this strange sound. And, I'm from Detroit and downtown Detroit at that. So, at nighttime, you're hearing, police cars and ambulances and, arguments and just, there's a sound to downtown Detroit. Detroit is very urban.
Sound of the city.
Sound of the city. And I get to Iowa and I don't know what this crazy sound I'm hearing. And then I learned that it's crickets. Like, I'm literally hearing crickets, and I was kind of freaked me out. What is this? But I had to get out of Detroit. It was just insane. And I wanted to go someplace where I could focus and get myself together and devote my time to what I was trying to do, And so Iowa was perfect. There was nothing going on, and that was perfect. That's just what I needed. And when you say nothing was going on, the kind of craziness that was going on in Detroit wasn't going on in Iowa, and I needed that. So a lot of times now people find out I went to Iowa and they look at me crazy, and I'm like, if you only knew.
Only knew, right?
If you only knew.
I love it. So we're going to jump in the game. This is where we're going to, start unraveling just some of the great things you do or have done in your career, and want to understand, how did you choose academia as where you want to go, right? Like, is that first understanding of watching those players and knowing like looking at a professor as kind of like a coach, right? Like teaching and prescribing. Where did that kind of thought that you wanted to get into academia?
I mean, coaching, being a professor, very closely related, very closely related. I mean, I think for me, where it started was, using another sports reference. The biggest basketball player when I was growing up, well, I should say the biggest basketball players, there were two. One of them was Kareem, who I mentioned already, and the other was Dr. J. And if you heard the way that people talked about Dr. J in the 70s, now, I realized at a certain point as a kid, I realized he's not a real doctor, but they call him Dr. J, Julius Erving. But the respect they put on his name, it was unusual because this is the 70s and not a lot of Black men are getting that kind of respect put on their name in public, in the culture. But when people talked about the doctor, like, it was just so much respect. And I'm like, well, if he's Dr. J, I could be Dr. B. But mine's not going to be necessarily on the basketball court. I'm going to go and get a doctorate so that is my official title. And so that was the original motivation, was wanting to get a PhD so that I could be, Dr. B. I think the second part of it was, all that energy that I learned from watching sports, playing sports. I'm a very competitive person, just like an athlete. And the highest level of education you can get is a PhD. So that meant something to me. That's the highest level you can go. And, you had to work to achieve it. So it was like pursuing a title, pursuing a championship. It was like, accomplishments, like the kind of things that, you would pursue on the football field or on the basketball court. I could take all that energy and I could apply it to pursuing a degree in higher education with that same energy, because I felt like, it's one thing if you're out hooping or playing football and everybody's going to match your energy. I didn't feel like there would be people in the academic space who could match my energy, who had my work ethic, and so it's like, hey, I'm going to be Dr. B. And in order to be Dr. B, I need a PhD. And so I had this vision of what I could do, not necessarily what was in front of me, but actually, I saw a cat by the name of Dr. Harry Edwards. And, I was watching, this is in the 80s. The Dodgers had a executive guy by the name of Al Campanis. And Al Campanis was asked on television why there weren't Black managers in baseball. And he famously said, or infamously said, because Black people don't have the necessities to be managers in baseball. And this created this huge controversy. And in the aftermath of that, one of the people I saw on television speaking to this was a professor from Cal Berkeley, Dr. Harry Edwards. And Harry Edwards was, this Black man with a shaved head and a deep voice. So I could identify. And then when I went back and learned about him, I learned that he had been responsible for organizing the protest of John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the '68 Olympics. And so he was this Black man who was very familiar to me, his style. And I'm like, he has a PhD, and I learned about him, and I read one of his books right away. And I said, I can do this, but I can do it my own way. He's a different generation. I'm hip hop. I'm the hip hop generation. Hip hop in the 80s is fairly new, not brand new, but growing up and all that. And I just had a vision in terms of what I wanted to do and what I could do if given the opportunity. And so that's really where the inspiration came from.
Speaking of inspiration, and Dr. B, we've gone 25 minutes, and I have to get this out. The Wood is probably my favorite movie. It was my inspiration.
Thank you.
In college and growing up, and me and my boys, we still refer to it probably on the daily with some line or anything of that. So the inspiration,
that's a big part of this show.
forever. So
I appreciate hearing that.
Yes, sir. So the inspiration behind the Wood and crafting that story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, in the 90s, we had this kind of film renaissance relative to, say, back in the 70s, blaxploitation. So, in the 90s, Spike Lee was kind of at the top of his game, and John Singleton and the Hudlin brothers and the Hughes brothers and, other Black filmmakers who were, making movies about the culture at this moment. There was a lot of attention on Black film. And there were quite a few films being released. And so I think the idea was to tap into that, but do something different. And, it's like there's a film from the 70s called Cooley High. And Cooley High was about basically just this group of friends going through high school. And so many of those movies in the 90s were like hood flicks, which, that was cool. But, hood flicks being what they were, people live life and go through regular things beyond, drive-by shootings and dealing with the cops and all that. Like, there's life and there's laughs and there's jokes and there's memories and, what you go through in school. And the Wood was really just trying to tap into all that and say, nostalgia and memories and, times with your friends. That's times with your family. A young guy trying to, develop his game in terms of, learning how to, approach women, what to say, that whole thing about having game. That was a big deal. And it's a real important part of the culture growing up. At least when I was growing up, I'm sure, you have your own stories, but I just remember, in school, it's like, you got to have a rap. And I would listen to records, and I remember listening to Earth, Wind and Fire, and Earth, Wind and Fire has this, song called Be Ever Wonderful. And I remember I'm going to say this to a girl. I'm going to use these words. I'm going to, so it's like, that's funny looking back on it. Trying to develop a rap, and then you're competitive with your friends, but then you go around this woman and, these young girls your age and you shy, it's just, those things aren't sensational. They're not extraordinary. They're very common experiences for everybody. And so, just wanted to put some of that, into the mix and say, we got a character like Stacy who's representing the hood and, the street game and all that. That's real, but even that's funny. I'm gonna, write a whole album by smoking weed. So there's humor in some of the more mundane aspects of the culture that, we wanted to bring out and put into the equation. And I feel like because so many people, just like you did all these years later, The Wood came out a long time ago, 1999. But all these years later, people still tell me how much that movie meant to them, and they quote lines, and I mean, it's just a testament to like those ideas of wanting to take some of those experiences and put them into a film. And it feels good to hear people say, that the movie affected them all these years later.
I love that. All right, so USC is an R1 institution, right? So research is really a big part of, what, you and other professors that, in the college are doing. How do you pick topics of what you want to research, right? Like you've done so much work, in this culture, hip hop, sports, art. How do you select or pick what, the next topic or the next, research project is going to be, or, direct your students?
I mean, in terms of research, I realized at some point, I guess when I was in college, I was taking a class, and the professor said, we're going to watch movies like The Godfather and TV shows like Miami Vice, and we'll watch films like Scarface. And I'm like sitting in class, and I'm like, this is a class in college? Because I'm watching this just on my own. My friends and I are talking about, these movies. Like, did you see Vice last week? Miami Vice was so cold-blooded. I'm in college when Miami Vice came out. Miami Vice was so cold-blooded. Dudes was delaying, going out on Friday night so they could watch Miami Vice first. That's serious.
That's
like, we gotta see Vice, then we can go out, right? I mean, when people talk about Scarface, especially back then, I mean, first of all, how many rap songs that reference Scarface? I can't tell you how many times I watched Scarface, just over and over and over again. And I'm like, Tony Montana, like, man, that drive, that desire, like, so I'm learning, people are studying this in a college class. I'm like, really? Like, I can do that. I'm doing it already. You gonna pay me to do that? Oh, it's on, So, I mean, sports, when I went to college, I wanted to be either a college basketball coach or a sportscaster. So, I've been dipped in that sports game from jump. And I knew nobody could match me on that, but I'm like, music, like movies, like culture. Oh man. So I need to go and get this degree because, I can stand on the corner and talk about all this, but ain't nobody gonna listen. But if I put that degree with my own knowledge, I feel like, that's a nice combination. And so there's just so much to study in terms of the culture, music, film, fashion, art, like there's just so much to study. And it's like people will say to me, well, what classes are you teaching, or what are you working on? What are you writing about? And for a lot of people, the things I do are considered leisurely activities, just entertainment. But talking about a Muhammad Ali fight, that's what I do. Or talking about, Stevie Wonder's incredible run in the 70s, his classical period, like that's what I do. Talking about, like, Biggie, Jay-Z, and Nas, that's what I do. It's not leisurely for me. It's not just entertainment. There's something within all that. People argue about who's the GOAT. Like, is it Jordan? Is it LeBron? Is it, Russell? Is it Kobe? Like, that's what I do. I mean, that's, there's so much information behind that, and the politics attached to it as well. So, it's not a separate it's not a separate set of concerns for me. Like the things that I love and I have loved for much of my life are the things that I devote my time working on. So I figured out watching a Muhammad Ali fight, that's research. Listening to Kendrick Lamar, that's research. Dissecting somebody's game on the court and the cultural implications of it. All that's research. And so I figured out a way to take things that I love and like make a living studying those things. And so whatever work I do grows out of that. And I feel like, to me, I feel like I won, because I would be paying attention to all this stuff, even if I wasn't working on it. I'd be doing it for free, but I get paid.
And it shapes the culture. And there's just so many implications when you peel back those layers, right? I mean, we know, like when Jay-Z said, I'm an adult, and he stopped wearing, jerseys, he ended a whole fashion kind of.
That was a wrap. Right.
Right. So
don't wear jerseys, I'm 30 plus.
Right, 100%. So it's just, and then even just how you brought us to how boxing influenced and how it culturally is depicted in movie, because that is a point in time in history and things like that. So for you to break that down and that importance to be able to share that, it's amazing that's out there, especially in a time where it seems like DEI and our history is further attempting to be erased as we fight so hard to try to carry it on or learn from it, with these certain dynamics. So kudos to you, and love the importance that you're able to do what you love, which they often tell us, right? Find what you love and you never work a day in your life. So want to definitely talk about another cultural significant thing, because you were, referencing The Last Dance. So we can't, and I think what I loved about that is hearing you speak about it on one of your interviews or talks, is that it brought us back to a time where God set us down. So it was a time where everybody was watching the same thing, like back in the days when we only had 13 channels. And it was just interesting that was the dialogue. I mean, heck, we even did shows. We did multiple watch episodes on that. What was it like being in that, Last Dance, and what was it, what did you enjoy about it? What did you think about the whole documentary?
I mean, The Last Dance was I mean, that was a cultural moment, I have had the good fortune of being in a lot of documentaries. As I walk around LA, people tell me every day, I love your work. I've seen you in this. And I really appreciate it. The documentary game, that's a big part of what I do. All that said, The Last Dance, man, that's just like another level. Because I remember when I shot the interview, and as I say, I do this all the time. So we're doing an interview about Michael Jordan. Like, I've done other documentaries on basketball. Like, okay, cool. As you say, God set us down. The pandemic hit and everybody had to slow down. And this was early. And they moved up the date of The Last Dance. It was supposed to come on sometime later. And everybody's sitting at the crib with nothing to do. And so this is like when I grew up, you said 13 channels. When I grew up, it was 3. It's 3 networks. And so everybody's watching pretty much some variation of the same thing. And this felt like everybody sat down and watched something at the same time. And it was huge. And what I would do is I would go on Twitter at the time. This is 2020. And, I would see what comments people had made on the East Coast. And then I'm like, okay, cool. We got 3 hours and it'll be out on the West Coast. And so there was this whole online conversation about it. And, man, I have done 1 million documentaries. I've been in a documentary that won the Academy Award for Best Documentary in 20 Feet from Stardom. Last Dance was crazy because now, I mean, people are like, writing articles about me being in it. And I think it was New York Magazine, Vulture, which is New York Magazine, did a ranking of everybody in it, everybody in Last Dance, 1 through 83. And they had me number 9.
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm top 10, like the President of the United States, Barack Obama, Phil Jackson, Scottie Pitt. Like I'm top 10. Again, as I say, I'm really competitive, so that meant something to me.
Absolutely.
I mean, so I'm getting calls, to make media appearances, talk about like that experience. It was just a huge cultural phenomenon. And I remember one point, somebody was on social media and they were like, Magic Johnson is the most well-dressed person in The Last Dance. And about 20 minutes later, they came back. They said, I stand corrected. I thought Magic Johnson was the most well-dressed person in The Last Dance until I saw Dr. Todd Boyd. And I'm like, there it is. I'm like, I love Magic, but Magic don't want this. This ain't what he wants. So moments like that, I mean, I will forever remember and cherish. And in that moment, itself, when everybody was at the crib, not knowing what this all meant, it was just a boost of positive energy that we all got, and being in it was, I think, extra. And I think maybe the last piece of this, which is really telling. So, everybody's masked up. When you go out and go to the store, like everybody's masked up. And when people would come up to me and ask me, aren't you the guy from The Last Dance? And I had a mask on and they still knew it was me. Like, that's when they told me, like, this is next level. So it was a great experience. Great documentary. I mean, so many people have tried to imitate that style now.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to have been a part of it. It was huge.
That's good stuff. Hey, MH, man, you ready for those 3 and outs, quick hits?
Yes, sir. Dr. Boyd, this is just some kind of random questions so our listeners can get to know you better. Texting or talking? What would you rather?
Texting. That's easy.
Favorite day of the week?
Favorite day of the week? Every day.
I love it. A nickname your parents used to call that you're willing to share?
Nigga. Little nigga.
Hey, followed by come do
Black
something.
ass nigga. My parents was on some different shit.
Oh man, I love it. Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
Man, driver. Shit, I hope to be 10.
How do you go about picking your frames? This is my last one. How do you pick your frames for the day? What's that process?
I mean, it depends on the day, depends on the vibe, depends on the fit. I will say the frames, that's the last piece of the fit.
That's the last piece?
So okay. I got, the jacket or the coat and the shirt and the pants and the kicks. I do all that first, and then I top it off with, the frames is at the top. Everything else is below that. So
I feel it.
I picked the frames last.
Now, do you start with your shoes, or you start with the coat or something, the fit? Which one?
I love coats. That's my thing, and so I always start. What am I gonna wear? What coat? What jacket? I love white shirts, so but I change the color up sometimes. So I pick the coat. And then, the jeans got to be right, or the pants, and then shoes. I would say the pants are maybe, depends though. Sometimes the pants can be important. But the shoes and the jacket, you got to have that working. And then that's when you top it off with the frames.
There you go. From top 10. From the top 10 right there on The Last Dance. All right. So I thank you for sharing. Now, have we still divulged? Because that was another thing that came out, right? Everybody wants to know where the frames come, right? They're trying to. Are we gonna get a frames line exclusive coming up here?
I mean, I'm game if somebody, want to finance it. You know what I'm saying? I could do the Dr. Boyd line, Notorious Ph.D. line.
There
I'll
it
tell
is.
you, I'll tell you a funny story. So I obviously I love glasses and I have quite a few pair. These were the frames I rocked in The Last Dance. But I went to this place where I get a lot of my lenses put in because in spite of the style, I can't see. So there's a practical purpose as well. And so I go to this spot that I go to a lot of times to get my lenses put in, and they tell me that someone from Detroit had actually called them during The Last Dance and said, I'm from Detroit, just like Dr. Boyd. Can you find me these frames? And they sent a picture of me with these frames on saying, can you find me these frames? And I'm like, the frames have kind of taken on a life of themselves. Shout out to Cutler and Gross. Cutler and Gross has been very good to me. That's the brand of the frames. They featured me, in one of their articles, and they've been real cool to me. And so, I was repping Cutler and Gross, and so many people kept asking me during The Last Dance that I thought it would be kind of funny not to answer. So people would ask, and so many people. I mean, literally, I'm not lying. People from all over the world, like I'm from Australia, So I just thought it was kind of funny. Like, I'm not going to say, just wait and I'm going to drop my line. So if somebody want to put some money into it, we can do it.
There it is. All right. Well, man, having too much fun here. We like to jump into the winner's circle. This is where we, talk about what you have going on or maybe what's next, and just channeling platforms or things that you want to talk about. I would like to start with the book that's currently out. I want to start from there and then, open it up to anything else, that's on our hearts and minds. But just really, what was the concept and why this book right now? What did you think that was needed for the Rappers Deluxe for this book, and what was the genesis for it?
Well, I mean, Rappers Deluxe, came out. Everybody was talking about sort of 50th anniversary of hip hop, and so what I wanted to do was write a book that really represented, hip hop as a 50-year cultural movement. And so it was about rap music, but it was about so much more than that. It was about all these things we've been discussing about film and television and art, and politics and fashion, and, just really the impact hip hop has had across, multiple areas. The music may be the beginning of it, but as we know, hip hop is just so much bigger than that. And it always has been. And so the book is a visual and a cultural history. And it goes into a lot of areas that people wouldn't necessarily expect when talking about the influence of hip hop. One of the people whose work is featured in the book is this legendary photographer, cat by the name of Jamal Shabazz. And he said to me, he goes, a lot of my photos, if you see his photos, you'll be very familiar with his work. He said a lot of my photos have been requested, for this kind of hip hop 50th anniversary. He goes, but your book was the first book that dealt with hip hop and American history. So I'm talking about, political events, cultural, social events, a lot of things that you wouldn't think of, on the surface. But hip hop's influence is so vast, and I wanted to cover that visually and also culturally. So, 50 years of hip hop history, 50 years is a long time. And I feel like I was able to document that in the book. The book's been out a year. is very well received, but it's the kind of thing that it never gets old, you know. So people could cop it now, and they would still have like all that history and access to all that, visual history, as well as, cultural, social, and political history. And, that's basically what it is. And I'm very happy with the finished product.
Love that.
So you mentioned several times you kind of the product of your environment. My parents grew up in the South, and I grew up on gospel music, and that's kind of shaped, just kind of shaped my life and shaped how we kind of grew up, and even now the outlook of life. And based on how crafting your stories and how hip hop is crafted and really shaped American history, what do you think is next?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I have an answer to it. I just look around me now, and there's so many things that are brand new. When you say AI to me, I think you're talking about Allen Iverson. I mean, but people, they're not talking about Allen Iverson. They're talking about artificial intelligence, and man, there's just so much going on that's new, and I feel like Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. I'm too old for this shit. The older you get, it's like, hey, this is happening, and much of it's going to happen, and it's going to impact the younger generation. I'm just trying to, make sense of the things I've been trying to make sense of my whole life, and now here's all this new information. I say all that to say, I don't know. And I'm comfortable saying I don't know. I hear a lot of these, YNs, as they say, a lot of these young rappers, and some of them, I respect what they're doing, but it just don't move me the way that, I was moved when I was younger. And I say that to say a lot of these things, it's a young man's game. It's a young person's game. So I don't know where it's going. Somebody younger than me can answer that. I know where we are, and I know how we got here. And I think when people ask that question, my inclination is to say, I don't know where we're going, but don't be so quick to sleep on where we came from. Because that history is what's going to inform the present. And I feel like a lot of what goes on now, and you hear this when people, as I said earlier, argue about who's the GOAT. And it's almost a given. They'll start with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, incredible basketball player, don't get me wrong. But basketball was played a long time before Jordan came into the NBA. The NBA didn't start in 1984. There's a whole history before that, but people just dismiss that like, oh, those cats wasn't skilled and they couldn't play in today's game. You got to be careful not to lose your history, because when you lose that, then you find yourself in this situation where people are coming along saying, we're going to erase all this, and you don't even know what's being erased because you don't have any connection to that. So I don't know if I have an answer for what the future is going to bring. I just feel like there's so much invested in the history that can tell us, there's nothing new under the sun. Ultimately, there's so much in that history that can tell us to where we're going, but you have to spend time dealing with that history to be able to, figure all this out.
Man, that's amazing. And like, speaking of history, so, I had a chance, I went back, I guess, because they opened the sports exhibit of the African American Museum in the DC area. Did you consult at all with them as they kind of put that stuff together? I know you've been out there a couple of times. I got to see, you took your picture with David Hamilton's Black American Flag. But did you help at all? And then what's your thoughts about the sports exhibit that they've added to that, which is important because we're talking about how it's affected our culture, right? And it's part of our history.
So my photo with David Hammond's Black American Flag is actually from the Broad Museum here in LA. I have not been to the African American Museum in DC.
Okay.
But that's where that picture comes from. They have not called me, so I have not consulted, and I've not been there, so I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on that.
Gotcha. And it's interesting, right? Because like I think it's part of like the work that you're doing, right? And we
Right.
need to kind of continue to have that and see that. For books, I want to talk about like your first book you wrote. When you state that thing when we talk about the diaspora and things like that, and it was like, "Am I black enough for you?" Right? How did you feel, when you wrote that, or was that like a necessary book, for popular culture, talk about from the hood and beyond, right?
I mean, that was my first book, so I was just gassed about being able to have a book published. And, at the time, going to a bookstore and see my book on the shelf, that was just such a great feeling.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a person who loved going to bookstores and record stores growing up. And I just remember going to a bookstore looking for other people's work. And then here it was, my work was on the shelf. That was just a great feeling. There's a movie called Cotton Comes to Harlem. And in Cotton Comes to Harlem, Calvin Lockhart, famously repeats the line, "Am I black enough for you?" Billy Paul on the Philadelphia International label had a song called "Am I Black Enough for You?" Probably more famous for Me and Mrs. Jones, but he also wrote "Am I Black Enough for You?" So I had those references from the 70s when I was growing up, and I was writing my book about hip hop and popular culture and the hood, that era in the 90s. And I kind of felt like, well, this is a rewind to the 70s. The question being asked, am I black enough for you? What is black enough? There was an old professor at USC at the time, OG, one of my OGs, cat by the name of Dr. Michael Preston, and he's very funny. When that book came out, I would see him on campus, and he would just look at me and go, "No, no,
No, you're not.
no," and that's all he was saying. He would start laughing, and finally, I'm like, "Man, why you keep looking at me saying no?" He's like, "You ain't black enough for me," and he just cracked up. So I said, that love, man, that love was great. Man, looking back, I was trying to, connect academic sort of critical theory and street culture. That's what I was trying to do. I wanted to bring, my writings changed over time, but what I wanted to do was bring all that, theory that I learned in graduate school in conversation with what I knew from the streets. And, we're talking NWA, Ice Cube going solo, Dre, Death Row, Snoop, Pac, Big, Nas, Wu-Tang. This is that whole era, early Jay-Z. I wanted to take all that and put it in conversation with all this philosophy I had learned when I was in graduate school. And that's what I did, So am I black enough for you? Popular culture from the hood and beyond. I mean, that was a long time ago, but I was just trying to, like a producer producing a track. Like I got all this like critical theory and philosophy, and then I got all this, hip hop, and I'm gonna sample it, and I'm gonna remix it, and I'm gonna like try to, make all those things work. I'm gonna mash it up. And I mean, hey, all these years later, that's the beginning. That's where it started. As I say, my writing has changed a lot. As a writer, you try to develop a voice, just like if you're a rapper or if you're a hooper. Like over time, your game needs to develop and evolve, and what you were doing early in your career is going to be different than what you're doing later. But that's the foundation I built everything on, like Dr. Boyd, Notorious Ph.D. Nobody was doing it the way I was doing it. I'm out here in LA. As I mentioned, that whole LA tradition, iced tea 6 a.m, NWA straight out of Compton, you know, Ice Cube going solo, going out to the East Coast, linking up with the Bomb Squad and dropping America's Most Wanted and, you know, Death Certificate, Dre and Snoop on the Chronic, you know, post LA riots, you know, and then you kind of evolve from there. That's what I was tapped into, you know, and I was living it. I had lived it. Now I was trying to write about it. And so, and nobody was, I'm not going to say nobody, but the game at that time in terms of hip hop in higher education and academia was really early. So I'm one of the people who brought that into the American university system, but I did it my way. The difference between me and other people is I wasn't just writing about it. I had lived it.
Yes.
Okay. And I was doing it out here in LA. It's just like the history of hip hop. You know, you start in the East, but the game changed, you know, when you came out West, right? And that history is its own unique history, which takes us from, you know, 6 in the morning to, you know, Kendrick Lamar and that whole lineage, you know. So I was part of that, and I was repping from my vantage point all that energy. I don't know what other people were doing in terms of writing or talking about this on the East Coast. This is what I represented, and I was living it. And that's how I got to be, ironically, the Notorious Ph.D.
Let's go. I love it. So we can wrap up here. Really, how can we support you? How can our listeners support you? You know, what's one thing that, you know, that we can do, or a few things that we can do to support?
I mean, you know, good, positive, supportive energy is enough, as opposed to hating. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you articulating some good, positive energy and you're not hating, I mean, you know, you got to take that and run with it. And so I always appreciate the sort of interest that has developed. As I say, I walk around LA now and man, it's the love, or, you know, I get it from people, social media, you know, on the gram or whatever, online. Sometimes it's even maybe too much to deal with, because you realize when people see you, so many people, you can't really respond to everybody, even though you would want to. It's just not, you know, realistic. But I appreciate it because, you know, I'm not a rapper. I'm not an actor. I'm not a basketball player. I'm an intellectual. I'm a professor. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to transcend the academic environment and become somebody recognized in a larger world. That's not easy to do, you know. So if you see me out, you know, and you recognize who I am, you're recognizing an intellectual. You're not recognizing another rapper. Like rappers, you know, they have publicists, record companies they have a whole machine behind them promoting them so that people know who they are and know their music. I don't have all that. What I have is my intelligence, my ability to spit this game, my style, my flavor. And I've been able to take that and reach an audience of people who've never been in a class that I've taught, who've never heard me lecture. And I feel good that I've had the opportunity to do that, because it means that, you know, everybody has the ability to access what I'm doing, even if they aren't in, you know, the academic environment. I mean, USC is a elite academic institution that not everybody has access to. So what I wanted to do was to do that, and do that at the highest level, and do it academically at the highest level. But I also wanted to be relevant, you know, to the culture at large. I'll end on this. You know, my father when I decided to go to graduate school, my father's a OG from Detroit. He didn't know what I was doing. I had to find a way to explain it to him in his own language so that he would understand what I was doing. And, I had this real kind of crazy experience with him when I was finishing my doctorate, and he was so proud of me, but he couldn't say it because he's from a different generation. And it's like, them dudes is hard, man. They ain't giving up no love, and they certainly ain't giving it up easily. But my father looked at my dissertation title, and he looked at the fact that, I had reached the point where I was getting ready to graduate with my PhD. And he goes, "You just finished a PhD writing about all this nigga shit, and then white folks paid you to do it?" He's like, "Shit, you my hero." So, how much better can you say it than that? I had to explain what I was doing to my father, who came from a completely different generation, completely different point of view, completely different outlook, who understood the world differently than I did. And that's what it meant to him. And so I took that. I say all that to say, having to reach my father taught me how to reach people outside of my immediate circle, and to go beyond just the academic environment, which I'm not downplaying because I've done that and done it, at the highest level. I didn't grow up around educated people, but I've had the opportunity to educate a lot of people myself. So,
yes.
That's what's up.
Love it. All right. So the last part we call the assist, and this is where you get to put that coaching hat on, man, that you've always wanted. So give us a coaching gem. We like to say like a word you live by, or a quote that you live by, or just a quote that would resonate with us and our listeners. So give us that coaching assist.
Man, I think what I would say is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. I'll hit you with that. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. And then I'll hit you with one more, which I heard Nick Saban say, and I just, love this, that I can't help but repeat it. Nick Saban said, mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So, I'll leave you with those two.
Love it. MH, man, you ready to give us those final thoughts?
Dr. Boyd, this has been an honor talking to you today, man, and learning from you. Big fan of all your work. And like I said, man, the wood shaped my childhood. So it's just crazy even talking to you. I wore my frames especially for you today. So, man, it's just been cool. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Hey, man, thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for all of it.
Absolutely. And just, and like all the time that we do, man, this is really an intro. So please go check out. There's great works. There's great stuff about our culture. We talk about the culture, and what we do is we like to bring people that, you may have missed, or you see that didn't know the depths of. So please dig into, like Professor said, you may not be able to go to USC, but there's his works, his documents, their documentations. He's done over 100 essays. So follow him on social. So we're going to put all of that stuff in the show notes. That way we can stay connected, learn about our culture and history, because it shapes the future. So I just want to thank you on behalf of Black Sports, Dr. Todd, like we've been going back and forth. So thank you for making that time for us. We want to continue to celebrate you. And as you know, new shows drop every Thursday. So please subscribe on our YouTube channel, because visual representation matter. And then know, wherever you are, please stay safe, practice gratitude, and know we're rooting for you.
Screaming, all us blacks got is sports and entertainment until we even.
Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo. Look. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade new rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap.